to see how we can help. At the Weissenhaus, the Kinder, that's the children, showed me the fruit cocktail they would be eating for supper. And many years later, I met a kind who'd been in the Weissenhaus that night. It must have been a Thursday, she told me. We always had fruit compote on a Thursday. Now, my parents had been forced to move out of our house in 27 Auerfeld. Now they took some of the Kinder home with us to Friedrichstrasse, a flat which we were obliged to share with another family. Now, my parents had hoped to keep the Kinder out of danger, but this was Kristallnacht, just about Kristallnacht. On 9th to 10th November 1938, the Nazis had a night of violence and killing against Jews throughout Germany. On this night, Nazi thugs roamed the streets, burning synagogues, ransacking Jewish shops, and beating up or killing terrified Jews. The Nazis themselves named this night Kristallnacht, and that's the night of the chartered glass. A lot of them, the synagogues had chandeliers hanging, and of course they were all smashed as well. Following Kristallnacht, 30,000 Jews were arrested and many others were killed. The Jewish community was unjustly fined 1 billion marks for the damage. So that was that. The Nazis made a dreadful mess in our apartment and helped themselves to some of our silver, even the cup my mother had run for swimming. The family we shared with had set up a shop for Jewish people in one of the rooms. The Gestapo threw down all their cupboards and chests of drawers into the middle of the floor so they could never be used again. And I imagine a lot of the goods that they sold would be smashed up as well. Then they drove my father and the lady from the other family out of town to find their own way back home again. My mother was so relieved when my father came back the next day, and the lady with him also came back after running all the way home. They were both very fortunate, as many people were taken to concentration camps, while some others were murdered. As for the Kinder in the Weissenhaus, they had lighted petrol bombs thrown through their orphanage windows. The children had to extinguish the fires by themselves. You could imagine how they must have felt. After this, we had to move house to rooms in Kaiserstrasse. Also, my parents decided they wanted me out of danger to a safer place abroad. I don't know when these arrangements were being made, but I do remember having to report at the Rathaus, the town hall, with my mother very frequently to see a Herr Schmidt. I was terrified about visiting the Rathaus. There were many steps to the entrance and many swastikas fluttering from the windows. At the bottom of the stairs sat 2 giant stone golden lions. Now they frightened me more than any Nazi and gave me terrible nightmares. I used to dream about them chasing me around the town. My mother had to pull me past them each time we visited. That's, if you come up later, you see the lines on that picture. In the Rathaus, Herr Schmidt sat behind a table which was piled high with papers. Each time we called, he always told us the same story. Your papers have not yet arrived. But they must have come at last, because my parents began getting me ready for my journey. I didn't know it, of course, but I was going to be one of the lucky Kinder to escape from Germany through a Kindertransport. Now, I'll read you a wee bit of this. It comes from a book. Following the Kristallnacht on 9th November 1938, the British government decided to allow up to 10,000 unaccompanied, mainly Jewish children, that's without the mother and father or all their relations, from Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia, and I think Poland, into Great Britain. Operation Kindertransport saved the lives of these children who would otherwise have suffered the horrors of the concentration camps and subsequent extermination. What happened was that the children started, the first children to arrive in the UK were the very beginning of December, and it saved their lives. And then people, they went to hastily established hostels, private homes and schools across Britain. It was July before my parents were able to organise a Kindertransport place for me. I remember Mutti packing my suitcase and the very special items she packed. My very own cutlery set with my name on them, and my name was engraved on each piece. 2 photograph albums to help me to remember, and they still help me to remember. Then there was a cigar box filled with scraps, shiny paper cutouts of different pictures from fairy stories and other selections. A tiny case in which to keep important papers. But I was only 7, and I made a great big fuss because I wanted Mutti to pack my roller skates. At 7.5, I didn't realise what was happening. It was all very sad. We left Castle by train on the 24th of July. My case was set before we boarded the train, and my parents were allowed to travel with me to Hamburg railway station. Now I remember I wore a red shoulder bag in which Mutti had packed some fruit, and I carried my toy dog Droll under my arm. And there were crowds of children at the station, I think about 300. Many were crying. The parents weren't allowed on the platform, you know, so you had to say goodbye to your parents and then you got into the train. But the parents weren't allowed to go up onto the platform. They could only watch their children from behind a barrier. I was pushed towards a carriage, but whatever happened, I dropped Droll, my toy dog, and he fell underneath the seat, underneath the train. And I made such a fuss that one of the helpers managed to climb down beneath the train to rescue him. Then my helper told me to follow him, and he took me over to where Mutti and Fatty waited, and I was able to kiss them goodbye. Shortly afterwards, the train, with all the kinder, left the station en route for Holland. We were to go to Holland and then we were going in a boat to the United Kingdom. I don't remember too much about the journey. There was a couple of big boys in our carriage, and the Gestapo came round and they wanted to search the luggage, and the boys had to take the haversacks down from the rack. And then when they came back, they had to go into the corridor with the Nazi. And when they came back, they were very, very quiet. I don't know what had happened. And they put the haversacks back on the rack. But whether they had stuff taken, probably they had stuff taken out of the haversack. The Dutch people met us at the station and took us to a large green field where we had something to eat. Now, I also remember being given Dutch chocolate, which I didn't like very much. I think that was probably what we call plain chocolate. The Dutch people were dressed in the national costume. Some years ago, I was told that Queen Juliana was also there to welcome us. I recall the Dutch people singing to us, and we sang back to them, I suppose songs that we learnt at school. Then it was time to board our boat for England. I was put into a cabin with 2 other children. During the night, we needed to go to the toilet. So we left the cabin to look for one, and then we couldn't find our way back. And you can imagine how frightened we were going along these dark corridors. And we didn't know how to get back to our cabin. And it took a long time till we found a helper. And by then we were all very upset. I don't know how the helper knew which cabin. Maybe she had to go to the office and find what number of cabin that we were in. And these helpers, they were allowed to come over, but they had to sign this form to say that they would go back to Germany. They weren't allowed to stay in the United Kingdom. In the morning, hardly anyone ate their breakfast. A big girl had told us that the British ate soap flakes for breakfast. They mistook that for cornflakes. And we all believed her. Soon it was time to land. I hated leaving the boat. There was a wooden gangplank. Walking down it, you could see the sea through the slats. Nowadays I think it's just all in one, these walkways, but not then. It made me feel very dizzy, but the crush of children behind me pushed me forward, and soon I had reached the ground. Now I understand, I don't remember, but I understand that on landing everyone received a paper bag filled with fruit and other things to eat. And I was told about one girl who'd been given a banana in her bag, and she hated it. She'd never seen a banana before, and she thought the skin was for eating. I don't remember that at all, nor can I recall the train journey between Harwich and London's Liverpool Street Station. And if any of you ever go to London's Liverpool Street Station, there's a picture here. That's a sculpture that's up there commemorating the time that the Kindertransport came over. At the station, everyone waited to be called. I was lucky because my parents had found guardians for me. Other kinder were not so fortunate and were consigned to hostels. Some even finished up in a castle in Wales, while in the winter time, others were sent to a holiday camp at Dovercourt, which was on television. That was the Heidi High camp that was on the television. That's where they went to. Those who went to Dovercourt in the winter time, they had to go to bed with their coats on and their gloves on. It was freezing. My guardians, Fred and Sophie Gallimore, had arrived, clutching pictures of me. "Just look," Sophie said, "the boy over there, we nearly took him." "Yes," said Fred, but the little girl with a large red hair ribbon holding the toy dog, "That's Dorrith for certain, let's go and get her." And that's how they found me. Fred's brother Jack had come also. Happily for me, he spoke German. All I could say in English was, "I have a handkerchief in my pocket." Later on, whenever I learnt a new word, I would put it into that sentence. "I have a dog in my pocket, I have a house in my pocket, I have a teacher in my pocket." And that's how I began teaching myself English. I travelled up to Scotland with my new guardians and Uncle Jack. I think we must have driven in Fred's Austin 7 motor car. My guardians lived in Edinburgh. Life there was very different from what it had been in Castle. In Germany, my father travelled everywhere on his bike, and I had a wee seat at the back of it. In Edinburgh, Fred had his car. There was also a dog called Rogie. I'd never had a pet before. Then there were all the children who lived in our terrace. I was able to play with them in the street. Because I was Jewish, I'd never been allowed with other children. It would have been too dangerous. My parents wrote to me, "We miss you so much. Remember to be good and don't forget to write to us. This morning we picked mushrooms and thought about you. We hope to be with you very soon." My parents wrote to me they were hoping to join me in Scotland, but before the arrangements were completed, the war had begun and their journey was cancelled.